The massive space station hung in the darkness between Earth and Mars like a giant metal city. Lights flickered across its surface as thousands of ships came and went every day. Inside the station, aliens from dozens of worlds walked through corridors that stretched for miles in every direction. Marine Sergeant Kim Dae-hyun walked slowly through the crowded market area with his squad behind him. The young Korean soldier had spent 6 months on a deep space patrol, and this was his first break in a long time. His dark hair was cut short in military style, and his uniform was clean and pressed despite the long journey. The market buzzed with strange sounds and smells from across the galaxy. Alien vendors sold glowing fruits that changed colors when touched. Others offered weapons that hummed with energy, or clothes made from materials that seemed to flow like water. Kim had never seen anything like it during his 2 years as a Marine. His squad members walked close behind him. Corporal Yang Soo-hyun pointed at a stall selling what looked like floating crystals. Staff Sergeant Lee Jin-ho shook his head and reminded them they were here to relax, not spend all their money on alien trinkets. Kim smiled as he watched his men enjoy their shore leave. They had been through a lot together during the patrol. Space was dangerous and lonely, but having good soldiers beside you made it easier. The Korean Marines had trained hard on Earth, and now they were proving themselves among the stars. Near the center of the market, a group of tall purple aliens stood around a weapons display. Kim recognized them as Vektari from the briefings he had studied. They were soldiers in the Galactic Defense Corps, and everyone knew they were the strongest fighters in known space. Their dark armor gleamed under the market lights. The largest Vektari stood over 7 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms and skin like polished stone. His name was Threxnal, and he wore the insignia of a senior warrior. Scars covered his arms, and face from battles across 17 different star systems. Other aliens gave him plenty of space as he moved through the crowd. Kim tried to navigate around a group of small blue aliens who were arguing loudly over the price of some strange food. The market was packed with beings from every corner of the galaxy, and it was hard to move without bumping into someone. He stepped sideways to avoid a floating cart loaded with glowing bottles. As Kim moved around the cart, he accidentally brushed against Threxnal, who was examining a plasma rifle at a nearby stall. The contact was brief and gentle, but the Vektari warrior spun around with fury blazing in his 4 eyes. His people considered any touch from a lesser species to be a serious insult. The massive alien looked down at the Korean Marine, who barely came up to his chest. Threxnal had fought across the galaxy and had never been challenged by any species he considered weak. Humans were new to galactic society, and most aliens thought they were soft creatures who relied on technology rather than strength. Kim quickly stepped back and raised his hands to show he meant no harm. He had been briefed about Vektari culture and knew they were proud warriors who took offense easily. The last thing he wanted was to start an incident on his first shore leave in months. "Sorry about that," Kim said in the common galactic language that most species used for trade. "Did not mean to bump into you." But Threxnal was already past the point of listening to apologies. In his mind, the human had insulted him in front of other warriors, and that could not be allowed to pass. His people had built their reputation on never backing down from any challenge, no matter how small. The crowd began to notice the tension between the tall alien warrior and the human Marine. Conversation stopped, and aliens started backing away to give them space. Everyone knew that when Vektari got angry, someone usually ended up in the medical bay or worse. Threxnal flexed his 4 arms and stepped closer to Kim. The alien warrior had fought creatures twice his size and had never lost a battle. This small human would learn why the Vektari were feared across the galaxy. His boot scraped against the metal floor as he prepared to strike. Kim saw the attack coming, but there was nowhere to run in the crowded market. The Vektari warrior was faster than something that big should be. His massive leg shot forward like a battering ram aimed directly at the Marine's chest. The kick hit Kim with the force of a speeding vehicle. His ribs cracked under the impact, and pain exploded through his body as he flew backward through the air. He crashed into a vendor's stall, sending fruits and bottles flying in every direction. The sound echoed through the market like a gunshot. Aliens throughout the area froze in shock as they watched the human Marine hit the ground hard. Most expected him to stay down like any sensible being would after taking such a brutal hit from a Vektari warrior. The purple giant stood over his victim, waiting for him to surrender or die. But something strange happened that made the entire crowd step back in fear. Kim Dae-hyun slowly pushed himself up from the wreckage of the stall. Blood ran from his mouth, and his breathing was labored from the broken ribs, but his dark eyes burned with an anger that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. The Marine wiped blood from his lips with the back of his hand and looked directly at Threxnall. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every being in the market could hear the cold fury in his words. "Big mistake, alien." Threxnall laughed a sound like grinding metal that made smaller aliens cover their ears. He had fought across 17 star systems and had never seen any being get back up after one of his kicks. This human should be unconscious, or dead, not standing there with those strange cold eyes. The Vektari warrior had no idea that he had just awakened something that his people had only heard about in ancient legends. Stories of warrior races so savage and brutal that even the mighty Vektari feared them. But those species were supposed to be extinct for thousands of years. Kim stood in the wreckage, breathing slowly and steadily, despite his broken ribs. Around him, the market had gone completely silent as dozens of alien species watched and waited to see what would happen next. None of them understood that they were about to witness something that would change galactic politics forever. The Korean Marine had grown up fighting in the streets of Seoul before joining the Corps. He had learned that sometimes you had to fight dirty to survive and that pain could make you stronger instead of weaker. Now he was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about underestimating humans. Threxnall moved forward confident in his superior size and strength, but he had no idea that in 5 seconds, everything he believed about combat and power was about to change forever. Threxnall moved forward with the confidence of a warrior who had never known defeat. His 4 arms flexed as he prepared to finish what he had started. The human should have stayed down after that kick, but now he would learn what happened to those who defied the Vektari. The alien warrior raised his massive fist high above his head. The blow would crush the human's skull and end this embarrassing display. Other aliens in the market watched in horrified fascination as the 7-foot giant prepared to strike down the much smaller Marine. But Kim Dae-hyun was no longer the same person who had been walking peacefully through the market minutes before. The kick had awakened something primal in the Korean soldier. His broken ribs sent waves of pain through his body, but instead of weakening him, it seemed to make him more focused and dangerous. As Threxnall's fist came down like a hammer, Kim moved with speed that seemed impossible for an injured being. He ducked under the massive punch so fast that the alien's knuckles barely missed his head. The Vektari warrior stumbled forward, thrown off balance by missing his target. Kim used the alien's momentum against him. The Marine drove his elbow upward with surgical precision, hitting a nerve cluster in Threxnall's thick neck. The spot was a weakness that few beings knew about, but human military training included detailed anatomy lessons for every major species in the galaxy. The nerve strike sent shockwaves through the Vektari's nervous system. Threxnall gasped as his 4 arms went numb and his vision blurred. He had never felt anything like it in all his years of combat. The pain was different from any weapon or claw he had faced before. Kim was already moving before the alien could recover. The Marine grabbed a metal pipe that had fallen from the destroyed vendor stall. The pipe was heavy and solid, made from the same materials used in starship construction. In human hands, it became a weapon that could shatter bones. Threxnall tried to step back, but his legs would not obey him properly. The nerve strike had disrupted his balance and coordination. He watched in growing horror as the human raised the metal pipe above his head with both hands. The pipe came down across the Vektari's left knee with devastating force. Kim had aimed for the weakest part of the joint where the alien's thick bones came together. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the market like a gunshot that made every being flinch. Threxnell screamed as his leg collapsed beneath him. The mighty warrior who had conquered worlds crashed to the metal floor of the market, sending shock waves through the deck plating. Purple blood pooled beneath his shattered knee as he writhed in agony. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds. One moment the Vektari had been standing triumphant over his victim, and the next he was broken and bleeding on the ground. Every alien in the market stared in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Kim stood over the fallen warrior, breathing heavily, but still ready to fight. His ribs were definitely broken, and blood still trickled from his mouth, but his eyes remained cold and focused. He looked down at Threxnell without pity or satisfaction, just the calculating gaze of a predator who had eliminated a threat. The metal pipe in Kim's hands was bent from the impact with alien bone, but he held it ready for another strike if needed. Around him, the crowd backed away even further as they realized they were looking at something they had never seen before. A human in combat mode was apparently far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Staff Sergeant Lee Jinho and Corporal Yang Soo-hyun pushed through the crowd to reach their sergeant. Both Marines had their hands near their sidearms, ready to defend their leader if more trouble started. They had heard the commotion from across the market and came running. Lee Jinho knelt beside Kim and quickly checked his injuries. The staff sergeant had medical training and could see that his friend needed treatment for the broken ribs. But he also noticed the way other aliens were looking at them with a mixture of fear and newfound respect. Yang Soo-hyun kept watch on the surrounding crowd while his 2 comrades dealt with the immediate situation. The young corporal had never seen combat like this before. In training, they had learned about different alien species and their capabilities, but no one had told them that humans could move like that when threatened. Threxnell continued to moan in pain as his purple blood spread across the market floor. Other Vektari warriors from his unit pushed through the crowd to reach their fallen comrade. They stared in shock at their strongest fighter lying broken and defeated by a being they had considered weak. One of the Vektari medics began working on Threxnell's shattered leg, while another called for emergency transport to the medical bay. They had seen their people injured in battle before, but never by a species they thought was harmless. The implications were staggering. Dr. Park Min-ji arrived at the scene carrying her medical kit. The Korean cultural attaché had been shopping in another section of the market when she heard about the fight. As the senior human civilian on the station, she needed to make sure this incident did not spiral out of control. She knelt beside Kim and began examining his injuries while keeping one eye on the crowd. The broken ribs were serious, but not life-threatening with proper treatment. More importantly, she could see the fear in the alien's eyes as they watched the Marine. Something fundamental had changed in how they viewed humans. Station Security Chief Gorthak arrived with his team of armed guards. The reptilian officer had expected to find a dead human and an angry Vektari to deal with. Instead, he found the exact opposite, and his scaled hands trembled as he tried to process what had happened. The security chief had dealt with thousands of incidents during his years on the station, but nothing like this. A member of the weakest known species had just defeated one of the strongest warriors in the galaxy, using nothing but speed, skill, and brutality. It defied everything he thought he knew about galactic hierarchy. Kim finally allowed Dr. Park to lead him toward the medical bay, but he kept the bent metal pipe in his hand. Other humans on the station were already gathering, having heard about the fight through the communication networks. They looked at their fellow human with pride and determination. The message was spreading throughout the station faster than official. Reports could be filed. Humanity was not the weak junior partner that other species had assumed. They were something far more dangerous, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant for everyone. The market erupted into chaos as word of the fight spread through the massive space station. Aliens who had not seen the incident firsthand pushed through crowds trying to get a look at the scene. Those who had witnessed it stood frozen in place, still trying to process what their eyes had shown them. A group of tall insectoid traders from the Centauri system buzzed their wings nervously as they backed away from the humans. They had always considered themselves skilled fighters with their razor-sharp claws and lightning-fast reflexes. But watching Kim Dae-hyun move had shown them that their speed meant nothing against such calculated brutality. Near the weapon stalls, a cluster of furry mammals from Proxima Prime whispered among themselves in their native language. Their species was known for their peaceful nature and advanced technology, but they understood violence when they saw it. The human had fought like their ancient ancestors who hunted massive predators across frozen worlds. Dr. Park Minji worked quickly to stabilize Kim's breathing while keeping one eye on the crowd around them. She could see the fear and confusion in dozens of different alien faces. As the cultural attaché, she had spent years trying to build positive relationships with other species. Now she worried that one fight might undo all that progress. But as she looked closer at the aliens' expressions, she realized something unexpected was happening. Yes, there was fear in their eyes, but there was also something else. Respect. The kind of respect that warriors gave to other warriors who had proven themselves in battle. A group of scaled reptilians from the Outer Rim colonies approached cautiously. Their leader was an old female with scars across her snout from decades of combat. She looked directly at Kim and spoke in heavily accented common language. "Human warrior fights with honor," she said slowly. "We did not know your people had such strength." Kim looked up from where Dr. Park was wrapping his ribs and nodded slightly to acknowledge the compliment. The pain from his injuries was intense, but he refused to show weakness in front of so many alien species. His Marine training had taught him that perception was everything in diplomacy. Staff Sergeant Lee Jin-ho helped his sergeant to his feet while Corporal Yang Soo-hyun kept watch on the surrounding crowd. Both Marines could feel the shift in atmosphere around them. The aliens were no longer looking at them like curiosities or junior partners in galactic society. Across the market area, Threxnall was being loaded onto a medical transport by Vectari emergency responders. The once mighty warrior was unconscious from pain medication, but his shattered leg would serve as a permanent reminder of his encounter with human combat skills. General Vextar arrived at the scene with a full honor guard of Vectari soldiers. The four-armed commander had received emergency reports about one of his warriors being defeated, but he had not believed them until now. Seeing Threxnall broken and bleeding changed everything he thought he knew about military hierarchy. The Vectari. General approached the small group of humans with careful steps. His people had built their reputation on being the strongest fighters in known space. If humans could defeat them so easily, then the entire galactic power structure was based on false assumptions. "I am General Vextar of the Galactic Defense Corps," he announced in a voice that carried across the market. "I must speak with your military commander about this incident." Captain Nam Ji-hoon pushed through the crowd wearing his dress uniform and the insignia of Earth's diplomatic corps. The Korean officer had been in meetings with station administrators when he received word of the fight. Now he found himself dealing with a situation that could reshape humanity's place in galactic politics. "I am Captain Nam representing Earth's interests on this station," he replied formally. "Sergeant Kim was defending himself against an unprovoked attack by your soldier." General Vextar looked down at the much smaller human captain with newfound wariness. If their junior soldiers could fight like this, then what were their officers capable of? The implications for future military cooperation were staggering. Security Chief Gorthak was already reviewing footage from the market surveillance systems. His reptilian claws clicked nervously against his datapad as he watched the fight sequence again and again. The humans' movements were too fast for normal biological limits, unless they had some kind of enhancement technology. But medical scans showed no artificial implants or chemical boosters in Kim's system. The speed and precision had come from natural human capabilities, combined with training and something else that the aliens were struggling to understand. Raw, aggressive instinct that civilization had not bred out of them. Dr. Park finished treating Kim's immediate injuries and helped him sit up straighter. She could see news reporters from several alien media outlets setting up their equipment nearby. Whatever happened next would be broadcast across the galaxy within hours. "How do you feel, Sergeant?" she asked quietly in Korean so the aliens around them could not understand. "Like I got kicked by a giant alien," Kim replied with a slight smile that made her laugh despite the serious situation. "But I think we just changed how every species in this galaxy looks at humans." Engineer Cho Hyejin arrived from the human residential section along with several other Earth citizens who worked on the station. The young woman had been designing improvements to the station's power systems when she heard about the fight. Now she stood with her fellow humans showing solidarity in the face of galactic scrutiny. Merchant trader Kang Min-hyuk brought news from the commercial districts where alien businesses were already adjusting their policies regarding human customers. Several species that had previously offered insulting prices for human goods were now requesting urgent meetings to renegotiate their contracts. The crowd gradually began to disperse, but many aliens remained to observe the humans with new interest. Representatives from dozens of species approached Captain Nam requesting formal meetings to discuss diplomatic relationships. Earth's status as a minor player in galactic politics was clearly about to change. Word was already spreading through the faster-than-light communication networks to every corner of known space. Trading ships carried the story to distant worlds, while military vessels updated their threat assessments of human capabilities. The galaxy would never look at Earth's children the same way again. As Kim was helped toward the medical bay for proper treatment, he could feel hundreds of alien eyes following his movement. Some looked afraid. Others seemed impressed, but all of them now understood that humanity was not the weak species they had assumed. The bent metal pipe still lay on the market floor where he had dropped it after the fight. Several aliens approached it cautiously as if it were a dangerous weapon rather than a simple piece of debris. In their minds, it had become a symbol of human combat potential that they had never imagined existed. News of the incident spread through the galactic communication networks faster than anyone expected. Within 2 hours, every major government from Earth to the Outer Rim colonies had received detailed reports about the fight between the human Marine and the Vectari warrior. The implications were staggering for everyone involved. Captain Nam Ji-hoon stood in the station's communication center, sending urgent messages back to Earth Command. The diplomatic officer knew that this single event could either elevate humanity's status in galactic society or start a war that Earth was not prepared to fight. Everything depended on how the various alien governments reacted. In the medical bay, Kim Dae-hyun lay on a treatment bed while alien doctors worked to heal his broken ribs using advanced regenerative technology. The Korean Marine had become the most famous human in the galaxy without even trying. His quiet strength impressed even the medical staff who had treated thousands of combat injuries. Dr. Park Min-ji sat beside his bed translating conversations between Kim and the alien medical team. She noticed how differently the doctors were treating him compared to when he first arrived. They spoke to him with the same respect they showed to high-ranking military officers from powerful species. "The bone regeneration will take 12 hours, explained the chief medical officer who belonged to a species known for their healing abilities. "But we are curious about human pain tolerance. Your species seems to process injury differently than others we have treated." Kim nodded politely, but did not reveal the military training that had taught him to function despite serious wounds. Some information about human capabilities was better kept secret until Earth's government decided how much to share with their galactic neighbors. Meanwhile, in the Vektari medical wing, Threxnal underwent emergency surgery to rebuild his shattered knee. General Vextar stood outside the operating room trying to understand how his strongest warrior had been defeated so completely. The Vektari military doctrine would have to be completely revised. The four-armed general had spent his entire career believing that physical strength was the ultimate measure of combat effectiveness. Watching footage of the fight had shown him that speed, precision, and tactical thinking could overcome raw power. It was a lesson that would spread throughout the Vektari military. Other species throughout the station were having similar revelations about human capabilities. The insectoid traders had always relied on their quick reflexes to avoid danger, but Kim's movements had been faster than their eyes could follow. Their confidence in their own defensive abilities was badly shaken. Security. Chief Gorthek found himself dealing with unprecedented requests from alien governments wanting to review the security footage. Military attachés from dozens of species demanded copies of the fight sequence to analyze human combat techniques. The reptilian officer had never seen such interest in a simple assault case. Ambassador Yoon Sung-ho received the news while attending a routine diplomatic function on the other side of the station. The senior Korean diplomat immediately understood that this incident would reshape Earth's relationships with every species in the galaxy. He began making calls to prepare for the political storm that was coming. The ambassador had spent 3 years carefully building Earth's reputation as a peaceful technological civilization. Now one Marine's defensive action had revealed that humans were also formidable warriors. It was both an opportunity and a dangerous complication for future negotiations. Back on Earth, military analysts were working around the clock to understand what had happened. General Kim Seon-ho studied the footage repeatedly, trying to identify what made their Marines so effective against alien opponents. The human body's response to adrenaline and pain seemed to be the key factor. Human evolution had produced a species that became more dangerous when threatened rather than less effective like most other beings. Millions of years as persistence hunters had created reflexes and instincts that served well in hand-to-hand combat against larger opponents. The Galactic Council announced an emergency session to discuss the incident and its implications for interspecies relations. Representatives from 47 different governments would debate whether humanity deserved expanded rights and territories based on their demonstrated combat capabilities. Several militant species that had previously ignored Earth's diplomatic overtures suddenly requested urgent meetings with human representatives. The warrior cultures of the galaxy operated on different principles than the peaceful trading civilizations that had first contacted humanity. Trade negotiations that had been stalled for months suddenly accelerated as alien merchants realized that humans might be valuable military allies. Contracts for human-manufactured goods increased by 300% within 6 hours of news breaking about the fight. Engineer Cho Hye-jin found herself fielding requests from alien governments wanting to hire human security consultants and military advisors. Her background in defensive systems design suddenly made her a valuable commodity in galactic military markets. Merchant Kang Min-yuk discovered that his inventory of human cultural items had become incredibly valuable overnight. Alien collectors were paying premium prices for anything that might help them understand human psychology and combat instincts. The human residential section of the station became a hub of activity as aliens who had previously avoided contact with Earth's citizens now sought them out. Some wanted to establish friendships with potentially powerful allies, while others hoped to gather intelligence about human capabilities. Dr. Park noticed that her research on human psychology was being downloaded from academic networks across the galaxy. Her papers on stress response and pain tolerance were suddenly required reading in alien military academies that had never shown interest in human studies before. In the station's command center, Admiral Gethmore reviewed reports from his intelligence officers about changing alien attitudes toward humanity. The cephalopod commander had served in galactic military for 40 years, but had never seen such a rapid shift in interspecies dynamics. Several species were already revising their military doctrines to account for human combat effectiveness. Training programs were being developed to teach alien soldiers how to fight against opponents who became more dangerous when injured, rather than less effective. The philosophical implications were just as significant as the military ones. Many alien civilizations had evolved beyond their violent origins and considered aggression to be a primitive trait. Discovering that humans retained such capabilities while also achieving advanced technology challenged their assumptions about social development. Kim Dae-hyun remained unaware of the galactic storm his actions had created as he rested in the medical bay. The humble Marine had simply defended himself against an unprovoked attack. He had no idea that his 5-second response had changed humanity's place in the universe forever. 3 hours after the incident, the massive conference hall in the center of the space station filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The emergency tribunal had been called to address what many were calling the most significant interspecies event since first contact with humanity 3 years earlier. Threxnell was brought into the chamber on a hover stretcher, still heavily sedated from his surgery. The once proud Vektari warrior looked small and broken compared to his usual imposing presence. Medical tubes and monitoring devices covered his purple skin while his reconstructed leg remained immobilized in a regeneration field. General Vex-Tar stood before the assembled delegates with his forearms crossed in barely controlled anger. The Vektari commander had built his reputation on the invincibility of his warriors and now faced the humiliation of explaining how a human had shattered that myth in seconds. "Honored members of the tribunal," he began in the formal language used for official proceedings, "I demand justice for the unprovoked assault on Galactic Defense Corps warrior Threxnell by the human designated as Kim Dae-hyun, Captain Nam Ji-hoon. Rose from the human delegation section wearing his dress uniform and carrying a data pad containing the official Earth response. The Korean officer had spent the last 2 hours coordinating with his government and preparing for this moment that would determine humanity's future in galactic society. "Respected tribunal members," Captain Nam replied calmly, "I present evidence that warrior Threxnell initiated hostilities with a completely unprovoked attack on Marine Sergeant Kim Dae-hyun, who was conducting himself peacefully in the station market area." The central display screen activated, showing security footage from multiple angles, capturing every moment of the confrontation. The alien delegates watched in complete silence as the events unfolded before them with crystal clear detail. First, they saw Kim accidentally bumping into the Vektari warrior during the crowded market conditions. Then, Threxnell's immediate violent response with a kick powerful enough to break human ribs and send the Marine flying across the area. Finally, Kim's incredible recovery and devastating counterattack that ended the fight in seconds. Gasps and nervous shuffling filled the chamber as species that had never seen human combat capabilities watched the footage repeatedly. Several delegates requested slow-motion analysis to better understand the speed and precision of Kim's movements. Ambassador Yoon Seung-ho stood to address the tribunal with the full authority of Earth's government behind his words. The senior diplomat had arrived just minutes earlier after emergency transport from the other side of the station, but his preparation showed in every gesture. "Honored delegates," he said in a voice that carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "Earth's government wishes to make our position absolutely clear. Sergeant Kim acted purely in self-defense after suffering serious bodily harm from an unprovoked assault." The Altarian representative who served as tribunal chair called for testimony from witnesses who had been present during the incident. A dozen different species came forward to give their accounts, and every single one confirmed that the Vektari had attacked first. Dr. Park Min-ji was called to provide expert testimony about human physiology and psychology. She explained to the fascinated audience how adrenaline and pain could actually enhance human performance rather than degrade it as happened with most other species in the galaxy. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," she told the tribunal. "Our Ancestors survived by refusing to give up when injured or exhausted. These traits remain active in our genetic code and can manifest during extreme stress situations like combat. The revelation sent shock waves through the alien delegates who had assumed that civilization eliminated such primitive survival instincts. Learning that humans retained these capabilities while also achieving advanced technology challenged everything they understood about social evolution. Security Chief Gorthak presented his official report confirming that all security protocols had been followed and that no charges would be filed against Sergeant Kim for defending himself. The reptilian officer's analysis included recommendations for preventing similar incidents through better education about human defensive responses. General Vexitar found his position becoming increasingly untenable as evidence mounted against his warriors' actions. The Vectari military code of honor actually supported Kim's right to defend himself once attacked. Admitting this would be humiliating, but denying it would bring dishonor to his entire species. The tribunal recessed for 2 hours while delegates consulted with their home governments about how to respond to these revelations about human capabilities. Emergency sessions were being held on dozens of worlds as alien leaders grappled with the implications. When proceedings resumed, the atmosphere in the chamber had changed dramatically. Instead of treating this as a simple assault case, the delegates now understood they were dealing with a fundamental shift in galactic power dynamics. The Centauri representative spoke for many species when she addressed the human delegation directly. "We must admit that our assessments of human defensive capabilities were severely inadequate. Your species deserves recognition commensurate with your demonstrated abilities." Ambassador Yoon seized the opportunity that had been created by Kim's actions. Earth formally requests that this tribunal recommend a complete review of humanity's status within the galactic community, including territorial assignments and representation on key councils. One by one, the major powers voiced their support for upgrading Earth's position in galactic society. The evidence was undeniable that humans possessed capabilities that had been grossly underestimated by every government in known space. Threxnell was finally awakened from sedation to give his own testimony about the incident. The broken warrior looked across the chamber at Kim, who had been brought to attend the proceedings despite his injuries. When their eyes met, there was a moment of mutual recognition between two soldiers. "I acted without honor," Threxnell admitted in a voice barely above a whisper. "The human fought with courage and skill that I failed to recognize. My injuries are the result of my own arrogance and prejudice." The admission from one of the galaxy's most respected warriors carried enormous weight with the tribunal. If Threxnell himself acknowledged Kim's right to defend himself, then no reasonable delegate could argue otherwise. General Vexitar made the difficult decision to formally withdraw all charges against the human marine and to issue an official apology to Earth's government. The Vectari military would have to rebuild their reputation, but at least they could do so with honor intact. As the tribunal prepared to vote on humanity's new status, Kim Dae-hyun sat quietly in the gallery, still wearing medical wrappings around his ribs. The humble Marine had no idea that his 5-second fight had just earned his species recognition as a major power in galactic civilization. 1 week later, the galactic community had been transformed. Reports of the incident had reached every corner of known space, carried by traders, diplomats, and military personnel. The image of a human marine defeating a Vectari warrior had become legend. But more importantly, it had changed how every species viewed Earth's children. Kim Dae-hyun found himself promoted and assigned to the new Human Combat Training Center, where he would teach other species about human fighting techniques. His first students included a group of young Vectari warriors who approached their lessons with newfound humility and respect. Dr. Park Minji published her research on human combat psychology, which became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. Her work helped other species understand that humans were not just intelligent tool users, but also apex predators with instincts honed by millions of years of evolution. The Galactic Council voted to grant humanity expanded territory and full membership status, recognizing that Earth's people had earned their place among the stars through strength as well as intelligence. 3 new colonies were approved for human settlement, and Earth's military was invited to joint operations with the Galactic Defense Corps. Threxnell, now walking with a permanent limp, became an unlikely ally to humanity. He wrote a military manual called Understanding Human Warriors that helped prevent future incidents by teaching aliens to recognize and respect human combat capabilities. In his private moments, he admitted that losing to Kim had taught him more about warfare than all his previous victories combined. As Kim looked out at the stars from the observation deck of humanity's new military academy, he reflected on how one moment of violence had changed everything. The galaxy had learned that humans were not weak newcomers to be dismissed, but warriors to be respected. And in the depths of space, that respect would prove crucial as humanity faced the challenges that lay ahead among the stars.